Deep within the archives of the Denver County Medical Examiner, in a folder that is rarely opened and almost never discussed, lies one of the most disturbing cases in the history of American forensics. This case became known as the reverse skeleton case because, well, that's exactly what it was. The body found in 1972 showed something that should have been physically impossible. Every bone in the body had been flipped 180 degrees. It sounds like science fiction. It sounds like fiction. But the documents exist. The photographs exist. And those who were there when the case was first uncovered still live with nightmares to this day. The victim was a man named Arthur Milner, a 50-year-old history teacher at Denver High School. Arthur was described as boring but a good man, a teacher who took his work seriously, who lacked great social skills, but who earned the respect of his colleagues for his knowledge and dedication. He lived alone in a small apartment downtown Denver, had few friends, and had habits that were as routine and predictable as possible. Every morning at 6:30 he woke up, every morning at 7 o'clock he left home, every evening at 4 o'clock he returned from work. In March 1972, Arthur did not show up for work. His colleagues tried calling him but got no answer. They let it go for one day. On the second day, they called the police. An officer was sent to his apartment. Arthur was found in his bedroom, lying on his bed, fully dressed. At first glance, he looked as if he were sleeping. He might have been sleeping if he hadn't been dead for approximately 2 days. Medics were called. His body was taken to the morgue for an autopsy. The medical examiner, Dr. James Eaton, conducted a preliminary examination. Nothing strange. An elderly man, obviously died in his sleep, possibly a heart attack or stroke. But when the X-rays began, something was clearly wrong. Dr. Eaton asked to repeat the images. Then he asked again. The skeleton on the X-rays was almost perfectly rotated. The spine was inverted so that the lumbar section was above where the cervical section should be. The limb bones were rotated so that the elbows pointed upward where they should point downward. Even the skull bones were strangely oriented, as if they had all been pulled from their joints and reinserted backward. But here's where it got strange. When Dr. Eaton actually opened the body during the autopsy, the bones were still connected. Muscles and ligaments held them together, but they were oriented incorrectly. It was as if the skeleton had been completely taken apart, every bone rotated 180 degrees, and then everything reassembled in reverse order, yet keeping all organic connections intact. Dr. Eaton was pale. His assistant was in complete shock. "This is impossible," Dr. Eaton said. "This is anatomically impossible. If all the bones were flipped, the muscles and ligaments would tear. Organs would be torn apart. This cannot be." But it was. It certainly was. Police were called. Homicide was suspected, possibly some unknown form of torture. A thorough forensic examination was conducted. His apartment was searched from top to bottom. No signs of break-in, no signs of struggle, no signs of weapons or tools. His body had no bruises or wounds that could suggest violence. In fact, his body was in almost perfect condition, apart from the strange orientation of his skeleton. No one could explain how this happened. Doctors from the University of Denver were consulted. They were baffled. Anatomy specialists were called in. They were baffled. Forensic experts and detectives were baffled. Several theories were suspected. Maybe he was a victim of experimental surgical intervention that went horribly wrong. Maybe he was a victim of some unknown psychiatrist killer who had medical knowledge. maybe it was the result of a rare genetic disease that caused complete reorientation of the skeletal system. None of these theories. The case officially remains unsolved. The cause of death was listed as natural causes, but the medical examiner expressed concern that this could be murder, and that the killer's identity might be a medical professional. But no traces were ever found. No suspects emerged. One night nurse who worked at the Denver morgue at the time later told in an interview that soon after Arthur was placed in the cold storage, strange things began happening. The refrigerators started working strangely. The temperature fluctuated without reason. And from time to time, she said, people in the morgue heard sounds coming from the cold storage, sounds that sounded like bones grinding against each other. Arthur was cremated at the request of his relatives. But the body was photographed completely before that. These photographs remain in the Denver Medical Examiner's archives. They are rarely shown, and when they are shown to new medical students or young pathologists, it is done with a warning: this is an example of a case that science cannot explain. Remember this when you begin to think you know everything. And in Denver, even today, old doctors and nurses who remember the case sometimes talk about it, mostly after having a few drinks. They talk about how this case made them reassess what they thought they knew. They talk about how this case presented them with the possibility that in this world there are forces we do not understand, that we cannot explain, and that we perhaps should not understand.